there's been a long-standing political hypothesis that is, if only a businessman if America was run like a business, there wouldn't be so many problems. There wouldn't be so many issues. There wouldn't be so much. That wouldn't be so unproductive. It wouldn't be so inefficient because private business, they don't put up with this shit. Listen to Jamie Dimon and listen to Tom Sosnoff. This is how it is. So
if only we could find a real business person. Where can we find
a businessman?
We need to find a businessman. Yep. If only we could find one.
Combining the world. It's like Christy Ross coming to Milan. And so, if we were to have a businessman run the country, then we would have a beautiful government and a beautiful country. That's what they say. And so Donald Trump's actually not a businessman so much as he is a gentleman who inherited a lot of money, who pretended to be a businessman on television for many years, but he's business-like. Other than the absence of any penalties for failure and the ever-present availability of free capital, but we'll set it aside and just presume he's businessman-ish. And
yeah, he's business/entertainer. I would say. I'd say he's a business personality. He's a business personality.
He's a business personality. He's one of the most successful business entertainers in American history.
Yeah.
And he's certainly surrounded himself, I would say, by mathematical purposes, the most successful businessman in American history with Elon Musk by the numbers. The jury's out. It's only been a month. And there's obviously lots of issues, lots of things, lots of positives and negatives that can be commentated on at this juncture.
Sure.
But before we get into analyzing this particular business entertainer and his businessman friends, did you have when there was in the days of Bill Clinton or the days of Jimmy Carter or the days of John Kennedy or the days of George Bush, and Tony Batista would say to you in the pits of Chicago, he'd say, Tom, if we just had a businessman, we wouldn't have these problems, and you'd be like, all right, Tony, I guess so, Bat, And so were you a subscriber to the if only we had a businessman hypothesis over the course of your many, many years among us?
Surprisingly, no. I was.
Okay.
The reason for that is, now, again, I don't put Trump exactly in the businessman category. I put him in the business/entertainer. We have had entertainers before. Ronald Reagan was an entertainer. You could argue, the Schwarzeneggers of the world, that kind of thing, entertainers.
Even Clinton was somewhat of an entertainer at the end of the day.
He was more of a lifer politician kind of thing,
He was more of a former governor, I suppose.
Yeah.
But Reagan was an honest entertainer.
Yeah, Reagan was, for sure.
Jesse Ventura, entertainer.
Sure, absolutely.
He was a fabulous politician as well. I loved when he was my favorite. When he was running, was it Minnesota? He was the governor.
Yeah,
he was great. Anyway, you're trying to make a point.
Well, yeah. It's funny you mentioned Jesse Ventura because I just listened to him the other night. He lives off the grid somewhere in Mexico. Crazy. He
should. He should.
He's batshit crazy, but entertaining. Yeah, for sure.
He's an entertainer.
Yeah. So there haven't been a lot of business people who have, or at least not that really come to mind, that have been.
Michael Bloomberg was a businessman. Sorry to interrupt you. Mayor of New York.
Yeah, he was. And he was a pretty successful mayor.
Yes, he was.
Unsuccessful candidate for president, but a very successful mayor.
Catastrophic presidential candidate.
Yeah.
But fine mayor.
Yeah. One of the reasons that most entertainers make good politicians is because entertainers, by definition, know how to entertain, and they can usually they can usually make you smile or make you happy or say what they can learn.
Win you over in some way.
Yes. If Elon Musk was not the richest person in the world, he wouldn't win anybody over with his charm and charisma. That's for sure.
With his ketamine chainsaw massacre.
Yes. Yeah. Either with the Jamie Dimons of the world. There's a lot of people out there that Michael Bloomberg was a perfect example of somebody that had a very difficult time talking. He wasn't a great speaker. I mean,
I believe he was terrible.
Yeah, terrible. I was trying to be nice, but he was terrible. And
I would say I'm a friend and admirer and former employee. And he was actually anyway, this is not a Mike Bloomberg conversation. He was a terrible speaker in the president.
Exactly my point, though. And, one of the reasons that, one of the reasons Reagan became president is because he was an entertainer. One of the reasons that Trump won is because he understands the business of entertainment. I mean, that's always been one of his strengths. And there are other people, like him, the Jesse Venturas of the world, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world. And I'm just thinking of people that just pop up on my head. But
sure, I'm sure we can right off the top of our.
I'm sure there's a lot more. And
Zelensky, and former entertainer, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Not to go global on us, but
yeah. So what's always scared me about business people is the fact that one of the skills of being a great leader is that it's not just all about being it's not just all business. And that's the difference with politics. And that's the difference inside of political systems. I've been hanging around politics since I was in college, interning, starting off interning in the New York State legislature and in Albany, working my way into Parliament and listening to all these great, speakers.
Well, let's be honest. You were a chauffeur in Parliament, so let's not misrepresent your role.
No, I was a tour guide primarily, but I did eat lunch every day in the members' dining room, so I was a special tour guide. But I listened almost every day. You were just
driving that guy's Rolls Royce, but anyway.
But every day I sat in parliamentary chambers in the chamber, and I listened to everybody just talk. And they're all great. I mean, it didn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Man, the bullshit was flowing all the time. And great speakers,
The system selected for some of the best speakers on earth.
Exactly.
You couldn't get in the room without being a great communicator.
That's one of the beauties of parliamentary systems. Anyway, I guess my point is you can be a great politician without being a great business person, because you articulate things, you repeat things, you're able to get different messages across, but there's not that much policy that you necessarily have to initiate yourself, or you don't have to be that innovative with respect to policy. You have to be reasonably smart, all that kind of stuff. It is very difficult for certain business people to deliver that same message or those same messages, and to deliver it in a way that makes people believable. That's why I said, Elon Musk could never do that. He doesn't have the ability to communicate, and nor does Jamie Dimon, nor did Howard Schultz from when he thought about running. I mean, these are
disastrous.
They could not communicate. They couldn't get their point across. And even
Bob Iger hasn't been able to get anywhere.
No, he can't talk either. And there are some politicians that are also challenged, but what you'll find is that most politicians, they're pretty good at, the art of the bullshit.
Throwing some words.
Yeah.
Throwing some words.
Yeah, they throw some words around. Might I say, you would have made an amazing politician.
I appreciate it. Listen, I'm a young man still. The days will come. Our day will come, sir. But
Yes.
but with all sort of joviality set to the side, the logic behind the reason that the logical basis for the businessman president as follows. The government is inefficient and wasteful and does not make decisions in a way that incentivize performance and targeted outcomes. So the theory of private business is if you open more brokerage accounts, you sell more sneakers, you sell more toast, you open more bank accounts, you take care of the clients at the airport, whatever it is, Like if you satisfy a customer with some product and or service, then the business benefits and you benefit.
Yeah, and when you talk about governments and countries, and you think about that for a second, the U.S. is not a publicly traded company. We don't really care what the market cap of the U.S. is. We do care what the GDP is. We do care about the success of our economy, but we don't care about the market value of the U.S. What that means is that our objectives are different. Okay, we are not as concerned about what our bottom line is. We are concerned about our culture. We're concerned about building a place where it's a good place to live, where we can attract bodies, brains, innovation, and lots more. And to do that, it's not just about, companies come down to, it's a bottom line thing. Either you're in the middle of some kind of massive growth, or your bottom line is you're just kicking out free cash flow. It's one or the other. You either get rewarded by growth or you get rewarded by free cash flow. That's all there is. And that's how you're measured. Doesn't matter if you can talk. In the world of
And growth and free cash flow is theoretically derived from satisfied customers. Theoretically.
Sure. Okay, that's fine. Whether it's a retail, institutional, whatever it is. Sure, you're satisfying customers. The difference is when you're running a government, there's a lot more things at stake. You have to make a lot of people happy. You have to make rich people happy, poor people happy, new businesses happy, old businesses happy. You have to balance lots of different things. You have to defend your territory. You have to take care of people. You have to build culture. You have to make places safe. You have to make places clean. You have to build infrastructure. And so the game is completely different. I don't know.
What I'm getting at, I'm with you, but who are the government's customers? Does the government have customers?
I don't know.
Are the customers the taxpayer? Are the customers the citizens? Are the customers only the people that vote? Are the customers anybody who has a passport for that?
If you were looking at it that way,
metaphor.
If you were looking at it that way, it would be taxpayers. You don't have to vote. You should vote, but you don't have to vote. I think it'd be taxpayers.
So the government shouldn't serve children because they don't pay taxes.
No, children are just
obviously you don't believe that.
Of course not. But one thing
I would say the customer passport holders.
Okay, citizens. Whatever. I don't care. Define it however you want. I think the difference is that you can't ask people that run governments to run companies, and you can't ask people necessarily who run companies to run governments, because that's all I was getting to is there two different motivations. There's two different bottom lines. There's two different objectives. Company's objective is to create free cash flow or grow. The politician's objective is a lot more. It's very different. And you would never ask a politician, which is why most politicians, when they're done in politics, they rarely go into business unless it's some form of consulting business, or unless it's some form of lobbying business, or something that they're used to, or that they can parlay off of their political experience. And that's why business people rarely go into politics, because it's a different mentality. It's a different objective. And now what you have in the US is you have an approach where they're trying to use a business logic in a political system, and it's not necessarily working. At least we don't know. It's too early to tell, but we don't think it's working. Some people will argue it is working. Some people say it's not. Whatever. It's not making people happy, that's for sure.
Meaning, let's just cut to the bottom line.
Sure.
The implication of a business mentality is on an individual basis, failure to perform in your job can result in demotion or termination.
Sure.
Which may or may not actually be true, but that's the perception of sort of private sector life. And the perception of public sector life is that performance in your job is almost irrelevant to your professional security.
Yeah.
The logic is that
yeah.
being vulnerable professionally generates better performance. This is the sort of businessman's rhetorical logic of the government should be run like a business.
Sure.
That the employees should be incentivized to perform.
Sure. I mean, where else? Government is so messed up that right now there's basically nothing is bipartisan. The votes are all one side, all the other side. Nobody jumps the aisle. Okay. If the system was truly, if it was a business world, everything would be decided on whatever the event is that's happening right there, whatever the vote is actually about. In the world of politics, the vote has nothing to do with the topic or the issue. The vote only has to do with what side you're on. That makes it not business-like. That's what differentiates politics from business. In politics, everybody votes on their platform. Nobody votes for the actual, or this is the way it is today. It wasn't always like this because people would cross the aisle. But today, you only vote for what everybody else votes for. That's why the votes are there. Nobody crosses over.
There actually is no analysis.
That's right.
There is no business-like discussion. There is only loyalty to.
That's right.
A group affiliation.
That's right.
That is indifferent to any possible.
That's right. So no matter what you say, right now in America, if you asked politicians on one side of the aisle, one question, whatever they believe, the answer they give you is the party line, no matter what. And
which is the least business-like possible way to make
exactly. Which is why business and politics require different leadership. Because it doesn't work.
Or political parties need to be abolished.
Or political parties need to be abolished. Yes, one or the other. Or something else.
Which would then eliminate the incentive to, which would force a vote based on the issue rather than based on party lines.
Listen, in a perfect world, you would say, you know what? I want the smartest person who can articulate things, who's the best business mind to run this country. You know, of course you would say that, just on the surface.
Who's also empathetic and moral compass and thinks about the weaker people.
Exactly.
All the things, all the layers.
Who cares about stuff and right. And then what we found out is that person doesn't really exist. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Either you're going to get some, either you're going to get what you have now or you're going to get completely the other side. But whatever the case is, you're not going to get exactly what you want. And the best you can hope for sometimes is that perfect centrist, which again, in today's world doesn't really exist or doesn't interest people in a polarized world.
The other thing is, in a world where communication trumps everything, saying that you're running the America like a business as a rhetorical device is very different than actually running the country like a business. So to your point, I should say, if the country was being run like a business, there would be no votes along party lines. The surest way to understand that the country's not being run like a business is the fact that anytime there's a decision, our decisions are made based on party loyalty and have absolutely nothing to do with the issue at hand.
Sure.
Full stop. I mean,
100%.
So even saying now, Trump's a businessman and now it's a business and blah, 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 is by definition BS.
Of course.
As much as it was with any predecessor who made the same claim. It's not even a Trump specific.
Of course, but go into any boardroom, not even any boardroom, but go into any corporate meeting, high level corporate meeting, and everybody states their opinion. There is no.
And the opinion is based on the issue, not based on who their friends are.
Of course. Of course. Best of friends can sit there and say, no, you're crazy. Doesn't happen in politics. Or it doesn't happen in politics in 2025. Because people we've turned politics. Now, the reason it used to work in politics and the reason it works in a parliamentary system that it always has is because the rewards were in line with the risk. In today's world, we have created a political system where the rewards are far greater than the risk. So the risk of standing up to your own party, to whoever the leader of your party is, the risk of standing up to that person is too great from the economic risk is too great to you personally now, whereas it never was before. So now people refuse to do that because, their livelihood. The game's turned into a money game. And it's essentially a very big money grab because what's at stake now are big donations. What's at stake now is huge campaign funds of which politicians essentially get to keep. And there's a lot of money, whether it be speaking tours, campaign contributions, whatever else it is, that I'm not talking even about the presidency. I'm just talking about everything else. The numbers are too big.
Book sales,
everything. The numbers are too big now for normal discourse or objectivity. Doesn't happen. So we're in a dangerous time.
Does the current trajectory of sort of slash and burn rhetoric, how do I say? So
it's bad.
I think
it's bad. No company could survive.
There's a Silicon Valley saying, which I do actually like, which is action generates information.
Yes.
And I think I would imagine you would like a phrase like that yourself.
That was great until politics became too intertwined with Silicon Valley, and all of a sudden, Silicon Valley bit. So Silicon Valley is not the independent economic machine it once was. Silicon Valley has got addicted to government contracts. Silicon Valley has got addicted to a lot of bad stuff.
Monopoly protections.
That's right.
To monopoly protections. But I still wonder, because maybe I'm on my optimistic part, but it's easy to be sort of concerned, obviously, by some of the business-like decision-making, the so-called business-like decision-making coming out of the government at this moment. But in my optimistic side, I say, okay, well, at least they're taking a lot of different actions, and all these actions will reveal more information. And that new information will either result in the dismissal of the current executive staff because they'll be soundly, rejected, or it will reveal a new operating system. Because I do agree that the existing operating system is calcified, inefficient, intransigent, self-serving, wasteful, et cetera, And so is there any part of you that's like, okay, this is destructive and chaotic, but at least it is going to force some new information?
Yeah, that is what happens, and that is the silver lining. I agree.
If there's any new information, it'll be get rid of these crazy bastards.
Yeah,
this is crazy. But that we get there pretty quickly because because the level of action is so high.
Yeah, we've swung too far, and it will swing back. That's what happens. We swung too far one way. We swung too far the other way.
Business like. Would you go into a company? Because the other thing is, because Musk gets a lot of currency right now out of the fact that he is perceived to have gone into Twitter and quickly fired 3/4 of the employees, and that basically the Twitter methodology is what's being used on the U.S. government.
Yeah, well, that's his MO. I mean, he thinks what works in Twitter will work in the US government. The only problem is Twitter doesn't really have a social responsibility to welfare. Twitter doesn't have a social responsibility to culture. Twitter doesn't have a social responsibility to anything. So, I mean,
nor is it strategic to global peace.
Of course not. Of course not. And it's an incredibly dangerous model. And the only reason that Twitter survives today is because they put enough pressure on large corporations to come back and, overfund their Twitter, their Twitter
Budgets.
deals. Yeah, their Twitter sponsorships and their Twitter advertising. The sad part about that is that these companies are going to realize, this is our legacy. This is how we'll be remembered. And who we make, when you make a deal with the devil, you essentially, at some point, you pay for it. And, these companies are going to pay for it, and they're going to hate what they just did. They sold out.
You remember Chainsaw Al Dunlap?
Yeah, but what? I don't remember where. What was he?
He was like a turnaround. He was like a CEO turnaround hacksaw Al or chainsaw Al, they called him.
Yeah.
And they would bring him into old calcified companies, publicly traded companies, new CEO, with no loyalty to anybody in the building.
Sure.
Give me the spreadsheets, mark, everybody with an even numbered or a vowel in their name and fire them. Don't worry about performing nothing. It was like a famous sort of management philosophy that ultimately was, celebrated, cover the Wall Street Journal, this guy's a maniac, all this, and then catastrophic ultimately.
Always ends that way. The ending is always catastrophic. You come in gangbusters, you end in a catastrophic tragedy. It's the way it always happens.
So then let's try this a different way, because then this is a good question for you, because you have a good track record in this domain, even though, obviously you'll differ 1,000 ways for good reason. But what do you believe are the 3 first principles of creating a successful organization? If it's not simply to come in and terrify everybody and fire half the room. Like if you're like, listen, walking in, whether it's the head coach at the Chicago Bulls or whether it's the president of the United States or whether it's the new CEO of Twitter, one CEO's theory is I just come in, I fire half the people, put the fear of God in everybody, and then they do, and then we go from there. Or I cut half the team, I cut half the players, whatever it is. Like that's one organizational concept, which would be Musk's concept at this point, right?
So where I differ,
what is yours?
So where I differ from Musk and where I differ from, I guess, others, I don't really know, is the first thing is I am absolutely okay with changing leadership. So let's say I don't have a problem switching out the brain or switching out the head because there's obviously a problem. There's a reason you were brought in. And the reason you were brought in was to make changes. What you never mess with is the body. You don't mess with all the pieces, all the people that don't have that control. Some may be good, some may be bad. Who knows? You'll figure that out. But you don't mess with all the people, all the bodies.
With the organism.
You don't mess with the organism. Of course not, because that's too hard to replace. It's too hard to retrain. There's too much skill there. It's so expensive. You get rid of, the first thing you do is you just get rid of the head, and the reason you do that is you get rid of kind of the executive committee or a few of the top people, because you have to control the vision, and you have to control the new vision. That's one thing. The next thing that you do is you immediately, instead of destroying the energy, the culture, instead of destroying all the innovation, everything everybody's worked for, and everything that's there, which makes zero sense at all, what you do is you create challenges and see who wants to be there. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's not like something that's like, this is not some conceptual thing. You create challenge,
new goals, and see who rises to the challenge.
That's exactly right. And then you change some of the pieces out. But first you get rid of the head, then you make the challenges. Once you have the challenges in place, then you figure out exactly what you have and then you recreate, the
And then
strategy.
over time, you restaff to the
Of course.
to the information revealed by the
And you
as opposed to
rebuild-
showing up day one and chopping half the organism and then see what happens.
And you rebuild the strategy and everything else. That's why when you have these huge governmental agencies, you don't shut them down. It's idiotic. You change the people that are running them if you don't like it, and you keep all your talent that, all the public service, people that have basically committed their lives to public service. You keep the talent there, and then you change the strategy. That's all. It's not. It's.
I mean, I feel like what you're describing is a more business-like way of looking at the government than simply going in and firing people.
There is no playbook that says we'll just get rid. There's no playbook that says, hey, you know what? We're just going to come in and get rid of 40% of everything that's here. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as we get rid of 40%,
Just everybody with a vowel at the end of their name is fired.
Sure.
Or
Everybody with a
even
vowel at the end of
Social
name.
Security.
Everybody of color. Everybody that doesn't have an American passport. You know how it works.
Everybody with an Illinois license plate.
Exactly. Everybody that's ever listened to a rap song, everybody that's ever done this. Of course. It's easy in AI. It's easy in the world of AI.
But so I guess my point is that it's not what we're getting right now is actually not a business-like method of operating anything. But suggesting that the current fire everybody or send me an email that tells me what you did last week.
I mean, there's a business.
What's business-like is accountability for the board, accountability for the CEO, and new priorities for the staff, and then slowly changing the staff based on performance relative to the new management's priorities.
Yeah, I mean, there's a business approach to this. I just don't like it, but there's a business approach to it.
Which is the chainsaw Al approach, you're saying?
Yeah, it's a chainsaw approach. Yeah, I had a buddy once that was one of the first investors in Thinkorswim that I had met through. He was introduced to us. His name was Joe Whiteside, and Joe was he was a pay for hire CEO CFO that went into distressed companies and he turned them around. He basically went in. He had a 2-year contract for a lot of money. Went in, turned around a company, left, went to the next company. He was in huge demand. And I always found his stories to be fascinating because although each company was a little bit different, he was able, because he came in from the outside, he was able to have a very objective view and he was able to clean them up pretty fast in most cases. I think his track record was like 80, 90%. He cleaned up, turned around, and put them in the right direction. I think that's what we need in the world of politics is people to come in and change things up. I don't have any issue with that. I think politics are no different. I think the way we run governments is no different than the way we run an economy, and things have to be disrupted every once in a while and things have to change, but it's the violence of those changes that you have to be careful about. You can't destroy your culture and you can't destroy the integrity of your system, okay, and everybody's belief in the integrity of the system while you're making those changes. That's the challenge.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my biggest concern right now for the U.S. as an American, largely operating for the moment outside of America, but really with American business, inside of American business, American facing, is the number of non-American businesses, small, medium, and large. I had dinner tonight with the executive from a huge Canadian copper company. And he was so happy that his Canadian copper business, which is a big, 100 million plus kind of revenue, big copper business. He was so happy that that business was a Canadian business that does business primarily with China. Not because he was anti-American, but because he's one of, I've probably talked to a dozen people in the last month who are extremely happy that they are protected from the perceived instability of trying to sell any product, whether it's a piece of metal or a car or a computer chip or a fashion item or a banking service or whatever, from Europe, from Canada, from China, from Mexico into America. And that all of those boardrooms and all those executives are trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this business work and be less dependent on America for my revenue, knowing that America is obviously the biggest market, the deep, like I want to be in America, but all of my contingency in the context of the new American government is America doesn't want to do business with anybody outside of America. So if I have a business, even if I'm a copper company in Canada, or for that matter, an American car company in Mexico, I need to have a plan to do business to sell Ford cars from Mexico back to China or from Mexico to Brazil or from Mexico to whatever. And I actually think that's the biggest concern I have right now for the financial markets is that you're going to start to see a greater hesitation to engage in long-term planning, that large capital expenditures tied to development outside of America into America from Europe, South America, Canada.
You hit on a really important topic. This is what the game that the Trump administration is playing is a game of chicken. And on the one hand, you introduce tariffs for the sole purpose of bringing the business back to the U.S. The manufacturing piece of the business back to the U.S. Because the logic is if you create a tariff, but if you don't have that tariff, if whatever the product is created here, then even if it's a Chinese company, Mexican company, whatever it is, if it's done in the U.S., there is no tariff. So that's the incentive to bring the business into the U.S. You want to build an iPhone, build it in the U.S. You want to build a car, build it in the U.S. Okay, this is the big game of chicken that's going on. So that's the reason for the tariffs. I mean, that's the only thing it can be. The other side to that is you're messing with free trade and Mother Nature, and these companies, they can say, okay, fine, two can play at this game. We don't care about your damn business.
I mean, obviously, everybody cares, but like the focus is, I want to invest and have more customers in Brazil, more customers in Canada, more customers at any place but America.
We don't want to incent the rest of the world. The dangerous piece of this game of chicken is we don't want to incent the rest of the world to disrupt us. We want to incent everybody to do business with us because that's what builds up our economy. That's what makes us strong. That's what brings all the capital here. That's what brings all the liquidity into our system is, we want that economy to be super strong. So we don't want to scare the children. But at the same time, trying to create some kind of method for bringing the business back here, you walk down a very dangerous path because it can easily slip to the other side. And so this is one of the things, this is why compromise is good. And this is why bullying is not good. Now, sometimes you get away with it. And sometimes you spin it and get away with it. But most of the time, this backfires.
Does this make you, just to finish on the market, does this increase your incentive or your preference to be short-term more bearish on U.S. growth, i.e. long the bond, short the dollar, short oil, all that jazz? And if so, and then why? And why not?
Because generally speaking, I am not somebody that cares about short-term economic fundamentals. And when I think about it doesn't make me, the only thing that makes me bearish on the stock market is when the stock market goes up too much and it's too strong. And I feel like it needs a little bit of a sell-off to get back into line. That's the only thing that makes me bearish. Nothing that happens economically is going to make me bearish because I'm an efficient market person. I already feel like that's all built into the marketplace. So none of that's going to make me bearish. It's just going to make me.
So your price extreme is vastly more interesting than any sort of.
That's right. I only care about price extreme.
By the time we have an opinion on the dollar because of Trump, the markets had that opinion long before we ever showed up.
I'm short the dollar, not because I give a rat's ass about Trump. I don't care. Couldn't care less. I'm short the dollar because the dollar's been going up for 15 straight years. I don't care about what, you can give me any argument you want about why the dollar's going up or down, sideways. I couldn't care less. I'm short the dollar because it's been up for 15 years. I'm going to buy the market if it drops more, because for the last 15 years, every time it drops, it goes higher until that doesn't work. But if the market rallies back up to record highs, we'll get shorted again. I mean, this has nothing to do with the economic side to this. Zero.
Yeah, price is destiny more than any analysis.
Most people do not understand that.
Sorry, say that again.
Most people do not understand that, and they get hung up with all the macro crap. This is just a game of price.
Do you think that the government right now is actually being run like a business in the sort of cliched sense, or is it just a rhetorical device for the current administration?
I mean, the current administration is taking a shot, but they're doing it using a surrogate. They're using Elon, a non-elected person, because I wrote about this 2 weeks ago. It takes all the risk off the table. If you want to talk about, I don't know whether Trump did this on purpose, whether he backed into it, or whether he just lucked out, whatever it is. But the deal with Elon is something where if it doesn't work out, he throws Elon under the bus. And if it works out,
so you let him go hog wild, and if it doesn't work out, you toss him and say, "Wasn't me."
He's an idiot. It wasn't me. If it works out, he's not elected. You get 100% of the credit. I wrote that it was a riskless trade for Trump, and whether he did it because he was smart enough to figure it out, or whether he did it because he backed into it just by luck or whatever it is, it's a riskless trade. Okay, Elon gets destroyed. Elon loses either way. He doesn't get credit for it, or he gets thrown under the bus. So is this a business thing? Sure, I'll give you that. I mean, I'll give you that. It's a business thing. I don't think the government runs any different, but I think that part is. I think we touched on many of the other changes to government this time around. But Dylan,
I like your organizational theory, which is to change the head of the beast, set some new goals, and then sort of see how the organization adapts, and then restaff over time, over 3 years, let's say, based on response to the new goals. That makes a hell of a lot more sense.
It's both the humane way, it's the ethical way, and it keeps the integrity of whatever's there and whatever people have spent their lives doing, keeps that in place. It's the good faith approach.